Hello everyone. Before we begin, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment saying where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories like this. Now let's begin. I remember lying awake on that unfamiliar mattress, staring at the slow-moving shadow of the ceiling fan, trying to convince myself that the tight feeling in my chest was just travel nerves. The apartment was too quiet for a place in the middle of the city. No traffic, no voices, just the hum of the fridge and the soft click of something cooling down in the walls. I had checked in late after a long drive, and the host had sent a friendly message saying to make myself at home. At the time, that line felt warm. That night, it felt wrong. The place looked normal when I arrived. Clean, minimal, almost empty, like no one really lived there. A couch, a small table, a TV mounted a little too high on the wall. I remember noticing how many locks there were on the door, more than usual, but I brushed it off. Big city. Cautious host. That's what I told myself. It wasn't until I turned off the lights that I felt it. That sense of being observed, not directly, but like something was slightly out of place. The kind of feeling you get when you realize someone has been in your room and moved things just enough for you to notice. I checked my phone. No signal. The Wi-Fi worked, but slowly, like it was being strained. I got up to get a glass of water, and that's when I noticed the bedroom door hadn't been fully closed the way I remembered. Just a few inches open. I stood there longer than I should have, listening. My own breathing sounded loud. The apartment smelled faintly of cleaning spray, but underneath it was something older, like stale air that hadn't moved in a long time. I told myself I was tired, that I was imagining things. Still, I pushed a chair under the doorknob before lying back down. I didn't sleep. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I had the same thought repeating in my head. Someone knows I'm here, and they're closer than I think. The next morning didn't bring relief. It made everything worse. I woke up to the sound of movement outside the bedroom, soft footsteps that stopped the moment I sat up. I stayed still, listening, waiting for the sound to continue. It didn't. When I finally opened the door, the apartment was empty, just like it had been the night before. Nothing looked disturbed, but the chair I'd wedged under the doorknob was no longer touching the door. It had been pushed slightly to the side, like someone had moved it carefully, not wanting to make noise. I messaged the host, joking about being a light sleeper and asking if anyone had access to the apartment. The reply came fast. Too fast. He said no, that the place was completely private, and asked if everything was okay. There was a smiley face at the end. I stared at it longer than I should have. Something about the timing felt rehearsed, like he'd been waiting for me to say something. As the day went on, small details started stacking up. The bathroom mirror had faint streaks on the inside, like it had been wiped recently, even though I hadn't used it yet. The trash can under the sink wasn't empty. There was a crumpled food wrapper inside, something I definitely hadn't eaten. I checked the listing again, rereading every line, every photo, trying to see what I'd missed. That's when I noticed the smoke detector in the bedroom. It was angled slightly downward, not straight like the one in the hallway. I tried to ignore it. I went out, stayed busy, and came back late. But the feeling followed me. When I returned that night, the air felt heavier, warmer, like someone had been there recently. My suitcase, which I clearly remembered leaving by the couch, was now closer to the bedroom door. Just a few inches. Enough to notice. The host messaged again, asking if I was enjoying my stay, mentioning how quiet the building was at night. I hadn't told him I was struggling to sleep. My fingers hovered over the screen as I typed a polite response, my heart beating faster than it should have. I started checking locks compulsively. Windows. Bathroom door. Closet. That's when I heard it. A soft sound from the wall behind the bed. Not a knock. More like a dull scrape, followed by a pause, like someone stopping to listen. My mouth went dry. I pressed my ear closer, my skin prickling with cold despite the warm room. The sound came again, slower this time, deliberate. Whatever was happening wasn't accidental. Someone was paying attention, and they knew exactly where I was standing. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hand, the screen dimmed, listening to every sound the apartment made. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from the host. Is everything okay? You've been moving around a lot. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might throw up. I hadn't made any noise. I hadn't left the bedroom. I stood up slowly, my legs weak, and walked toward the bedroom door. That's when I noticed the closet. The door was open. I knew for a fact I had closed it. Inside, pushed behind my hanging clothes, was a narrow panel I hadn't seen before. It was slightly ajar. Cold air drifted through the crack, carrying the smell of dust and something metallic. My hands were shaking as I pulled it open. Behind it was a tight crawl space, barely wide enough for a person. On the other side, I could see a faint glow. A light. My phone buzzed again. "You shouldn't be back there." That's when I realized the smoke detector above the bed wasn't a detector at all. It was a camera. The small black lens was impossible to miss once I knew what I was looking at. I backed away, my heart slamming in my ears, and reached for the front door. It didn't open. The lock turned, but the handle wouldn't move. Another message came through. "Please don't panic. We can talk." I felt tears blur my vision as a sound came from the crawl space. Breathing. Slow and controlled. The panel shifted wider. A face appeared in the gap, half lit, eyes locked on me with a calm that felt practiced. I screamed, my voice breaking as I grabbed a chair and slammed it into the door handle again and again. The lock finally gave out. I ran barefoot down the hallway, my phone slipping from my hand, the sound of footsteps echoing behind me until I burst outside into the street, shaking so badly there on the sidewalk, barefoot and shaking, staring at the building like it might breathe back at me. A couple walked past and asked if I was okay, but I couldn't form the words. My mouth kept opening, nothing coming out. When I finally found my phone in my pocket, my hands were so numb I dropped it twice before I managed to dial. The police came, along with an ambulance I didn't think I needed until I started hyperventilating in the back of the car. I tried to explain everything, the messages, the camera, the crawl space, but it all sounded unreal out loud, like something I'd dreamed up from exhaustion. They went inside the apartment. They stayed longer than I expected. When they came back out, their faces had changed. Not panicking, just heavy. They told me the host wasn't on the lease. The real tenant had moved out months ago and reported strange noises before leaving. Inside the walls, they found wiring, recording equipment, and signs that someone had been living there without being seen. My bags were gone. So was my laptop. They asked if I wanted to press charges, if I could identify the man I'd seen. I couldn't stop shaking long enough to answer properly. All I could picture was his face in that narrow opening, the calm in his eyes. He hadn't run when I escaped. He hadn't needed to. I slept in a hospital room that night with the lights on, flinching every time someone walked past the door. Even with people around me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched, that somewhere, someone was replaying everything I'd done without knowing. I didn't go back for my things. I canceled the rest of the trip and went straight home, but home didn't feel safe anymore. For weeks, I slept with a light on and my phone face up on the nightstand, checking reflections in dark screens, listening for sounds that didn't belong. Every unfamiliar noise made my body tense like I was back in that room again. What stayed with me the most wasn't the camera or the crawl space. It was the messages. The way he spoke to me like I was already part of something he controlled. Friendly. Polite. Watching. I still don't know how long he'd been doing it, or how many people stayed there before me and never realized. I don't know how many noticed something was wrong and convinced themselves it was nothing. The police never found him. The listing disappeared. The account was deleted like it had never existed. Sometimes I search for the address online just to see if it's still there, if anyone else is staying behind those walls now, trusting the locks, trusting the silence. I think about how easy it was to ignore my instincts. How badly I wanted to believe I was safe just because I'd paid and been welcomed. That's the part that scares me the most. Not that someone was watching, but that I let them. And sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night and my phone screen lights up for no reason, I still wonder if he kept a copy of everything. And if somewhere, I'm still just another recording he hasn't erased yet. I remember standing in the shower, eyes closed, letting the hot water run longer than it should have, when I heard the sound of my suitcase zipper being pulled open. I froze, shampoo still in my hair, my heart suddenly beating so hard it felt loud enough to hear over the water. I told myself it was nothing. The pipes. The building is settling. Anything but what it sounded like. The Airbnb was a small guest house behind a family's main home, tucked away in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The listing said private entrance, and technically it was. A side gate, a short path, then the door. The host was friendly, overly friendly, insisting I message him if I needed anything at all. I was staying alone for work, just 3 nights. Cheap, clean, convenient. That's all I cared about. When I first arrived, he showed me around himself, pointed out the locks, the windows. The Wi-Fi password is written neatly on a card. He laughed when I asked about privacy and said, "You won't even know we're here." At the time, that sounded reassuring. Back in the shower, the zipper sound came again. Slower this time. Deliberate. I turned off the water, my ears ringing in the sudden silence. "Hello." My voice came out weak. No answer. I wrapped myself in a towel and stepped out, my skin still hot, my stomach cold. My suitcase was open on the bed. Clothes shifted. My laptop moved from where I'd left it. Nothing was missing, but everything felt touched. Like someone had gone through my things with time, with interest. On the desk, my notebook was open to a page I hadn't written on yet. That's when I noticed the door. Still locked. Chain still on. No signs of force. No broken window. No explanation that made sense. I stood there dripping onto the floor, realizing something slowly and painfully clear. Someone had been inside with me, and they hadn't needed to break in. I didn't tell the host right away. I cleaned up, closed my suitcase, and tried to convince myself I'd left it open. Memory can play tricks when you're tired. That's what I kept repeating while my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Still, I took photos of everything before leaving the room, just in case. When I came back that evening, the guest house smelled different. Not dirty, just lived in, like warm food and someone else's laundry detergent. I checked the windows. Locked. The bathroom. Untouched. But my bedspread had a new crease running down the middle, as if someone had sat there. The notebook on the desk was closed now, placed neatly on top of my laptop. I messaged the host, trying to sound casual, asking if anyone had entered the room while I was out. He replied with a laugh emoji and said no, but added, "We sometimes check the breaker box if power acts up." I hadn't mentioned any power issues. When I asked where the breaker box was, he said it was near the room and changed the subject. That night, I heard footsteps on the gravel path outside around midnight. Slow. Careful. They stopped right outside my door. I held my breath, counting seconds, waiting for a knock that never came. The footsteps eventually moved away, but sleep didn't come with them. The next morning, I noticed small things missing. Not valuables. My phone charger. A pair of socks. Things that felt personal. Things you'd only take if you wanted someone to notice. When I checked my laptop, my browser history was open to a tab I hadn't searched, local bus schedules. My chest tightened. Someone had been using it. I confronted the host in person that afternoon. He smiled the whole time, standing just a little too close, telling me I must have forgotten things because I seemed stressed. He mentioned my work schedule without me ever telling him. Asked why I'd been up so late the night before. When I stepped back, he stepped forward again, still smiling. That night, I barricaded the door with a chair and didn't turn the lights off. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from the host. "You don't need to lock yourself in. I just want to make sure you're comfortable." I stared at the screen, my throat tight, realizing the worst part wasn't that he'd been inside. It was that he was watching me realize it. I didn't respond to the message. I turned my phone face down and sat on the edge of the bed, listening to my own heartbeat pound in my ears. The chair against the door felt useless now, more symbolic than protective. Every sound outside made my shoulders tense, the wind, distant traffic, the faint creak of the house settling. Then I heard the lock. Not the door opening. Just the soft metallic click of a key turning and stopping. Testing it. Slowly. Like whoever was on the other side already knew it wouldn't open. My phone buzzed again. "You moved the chair." I felt something cold slide through my chest. He could see inside. I scanned the room desperately, my eyes landing on the smoke detector above the bed. A tiny green light blinked once, then went still. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and whispered that I was leaving, hoping he could hear the fear in my voice. Another message came through immediately. "There's no need to make this difficult." The doorknob rattled, harder this time. Not enough to break it, just enough to remind me it could. I ran to the bathroom and locked myself in, pressing my back against the door. My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages stacking up. You should sit down. You're shaking." The sound of keys stopped. Silence stretched out, heavy and suffocating. Then a new sound. Slow footsteps circling the guest house, gravel crunching deliberately beneath them. I saw a shadow pass under the bathroom door. The handle jerked once. Twice. I screamed, my voice cracking as I slammed my shoulder into the door to keep it shut. Somewhere nearby, I heard him sigh. Calm. Almost annoyed. "I just wanted to talk," he said softly through the door. That was when I smashed the small bathroom window with my elbow, ignoring the pain, and climbed out into the dark yard, cutting my foot on the way down. I didn't look back. I just ran, barefoot and bleeding, until the sound of gravel disappeared behind me. I ended up hiding behind a parked car 2 streets away, my chest burning every time I tried to breathe normally. My foot was bleeding, my towel gone, my clothes torn, but none of that felt real yet. I kept staring back toward the house, expecting the gate to open, expecting him to follow. He didn't. That scared me more than if he had. When I finally called the police, my voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. They took me seriously at first. They always do when you're shaking and bleeding. They went to the property while I sat on the curb wrapped in a blanket, replaying every message in my head. They came back quieter, told me the host said I must have panicked, that no one else had entered the guest house. He showed them the locks, the keys, the listing. Everything looked legal, normal. They said without proof, there wasn't much they could do. I asked them to check the room anyway. One officer came back holding my phone charger. Another found my socks folded neatly inside a drawer. They didn't say anything, but the way they avoided my eyes said enough. I didn't go back inside. I left with nothing but the clothes the paramedic gave me. My laptop stayed there, my suitcase, everything I'd brought with me. The host messaged once more as I rode away in the patrol car. "You forgot some things." I blocked the number, but the damage was already done. I didn't feel safe inside my own body anymore, like my sense of control had been taken and quietly put somewhere I couldn't reach. I never recovered my things. The listing vanished a few days later, and when I checked the address again, it was back online under a different name with new photos. Same guest house, same path, same promise of privacy. I reported it, but nothing came of it. There was always a reason. There is always a delay. What changed wasn't my travel habits. It was how I exist in space now. I don't shower without locking doors twice. I don't leave my bags unattended, even with friends. I notice where cameras could be, where someone might stand without being seen. It's exhausting living like that, but it feels necessary. Sometimes I replay his words in my head. You don't need to lock yourself in. The way he said it was like advice. Like care. That's the part that still turns my stomach. He never yelled. Never chased me into the street. He didn't need to. He already had what he wanted. The proof that he could step into my life without permission and leave something broken behind. I still wonder how many people stayed there after me and blamed themselves for feeling uneasy. How many noticed small things missing and decided not to make a problem out of it. How many hosts hide behind friendliness and rules, knowing exactly how far they can go without consequences. The scariest part isn't that he knew I was afraid. It's that he knew I would doubt myself more than I would accuse him. I remember arriving at the Airbnb late in the evening, rain slicking the street and making every puddle glow with orange light from the street lamps. My suitcase wheels clicked against the cracked sidewalk as I fumbled with the lock on the front gate. The host had promised quiet, private nights, and from the outside, the place looked perfect. Neat landscaping, warm light spilling from the windows, nothing that screamed danger. Inside, it smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and damp carpet. The furniture was sparse, just a small couch, a table, and a bed tucked into a corner with perfectly folded linens. I set my bags down, wiped my wet shoes on the mat, and noticed a stack of keys on the counter. One for the front door, one for the bedroom. Everything felt unusually precise. The host had met me at the door, smiling, apologizing for the late check-in. He handed me a small card with Wi-Fi info and the house rules typed neatly in bullet points. I nodded, trying to sound polite, feeling the warmth of exhaustion from the long drive. He lingered just a second too long, talking about making myself at home, before leaving through the back door. I unpacked slowly, listening to the rain patter against the windows. That's when I noticed it, a faint tapping sound, almost like fingernails against glass, coming from the corner of the living room near the small bookshelf. I froze. It stopped immediately. My first thought was wind or rain hitting the window. Then I realized the window was closed. Something about the way the room felt suddenly heavier, smaller, made the hair on my arms rise. I shrugged, forcing myself to ignore it, but I kept hearing it, the soft, almost deliberate taps, always when I moved or looked away, always enough to make me question whether I was imagining it. The tapping didn't stop that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, pretending the sound was just rain dripping through the eaves. But each time I turned over, I could hear it again, soft and deliberate, moving closer, always from the same corner. My phone buzzed. It was a message from the host. "Hope you're settling in okay. Don't mind the noises. Old houses have character." I stared at it, feeling a cold knot in my stomach. I hadn't complained. I hadn't even noticed a noise while texting him. How did he know? The next morning, I tried to distract myself by exploring the neighborhood. When I returned, the front door was unlocked. I was certain I'd locked it before leaving. My heart skipped a beat, but nothing seemed disturbed. Still, when I opened the bedroom door, my suitcase was shifted a few inches from where I left it, my clothes slightly rumpled. I hadn't touched them since morning. I called the host, trying to keep my voice steady, asking if anyone else had access to the house. His answer was smooth, friendly. "No one, don't worry. You have the place to yourself." But his tone lingered, like he was too eager to reassure me. That night, the tapping returned, louder and slower. I followed it to the bookshelf. A small stack of books had been moved, forming a subtle gap behind which the wall looked slightly discolored, like it had been tampered with. I pressed my hand against it, and the faintest draft slid across my fingers. My stomach sank. Over the next 2 days, I noticed small things missing or moved. A pair of socks here, a charger there, my notebook open to a page I hadn't written on. Every time I confronted the host, he laughed softly, saying I must be tired or imagining things. He never seemed defensive, just amused. By the third night, I barely slept. I kept my phone in my hand, watching the reflection in the window as I lay on the bed. Each shadow outside felt deliberate, each creak in the floor a signal that I wasn't alone. The host had promised privacy, but it was clear someone had been inside, watching, learning my habits, waiting for me to notice. And I couldn't shake the thought that maybe he was still inside, just out of sight, smiling, seeing exactly how terrified I was becoming. Around 2 a.m., the tapping started again. This time it wasn't soft. It was deliberate, urgent, moving across the floor toward the bedroom. I froze under the blankets, my hands clutching my phone so tightly the screen cracked slightly. My heart felt like it might explode in my chest. Then my phone buzzed. A message from the host. "I see you're awake. Don't be scared." I screamed and scrambled to the door, trying the locks. They clicked, but the handle wouldn't move. Not enough to break the door, just enough to remind me it could be opened if someone wanted. Another message, "Relax. I just want to watch you sleep." I realized then that the small smoke detector above the bed wasn't a detector at all. A tiny black lens glinted in the dim light. My stomach dropped. Every sound, every movement, every moment of fear had been seen. Recorded. Observed. I ran toward the window, yanking at the latch. It resisted, old and painted shut. My hands slipped on the wet glass, and I cut myself, ignoring the sting as I tried to pry it open. The tapping grew louder, closer, on the other side of the bed, circling, deliberate. A shadow passed beneath the bookshelf where the wall had been discolored. My bag rattled. My laptop slid slightly across the desk as if someone had nudged it. Then I heard it, a slow, controlled breath, right behind me. I smashed the window with my elbow, ignoring the pain as glass cut my skin. I climbed out into the rain, barefoot, trembling, soaked, my lungs burning as I ran into the dark street. The tapping, the creaking, the soft laughter followed me in my mind, even after I was gone, echoing like it had never left the apartment at all. I didn't stop running until the streetlights disappeared behind me, and the sound of the house was just a memory. My clothes were soaked, my feet bleeding, but I couldn't focus on anything except getting as far away as possible. Every shadow on the sidewalks felt like him, every car that passed like it might stop. I called the police once I found a gas station open. My voice shook so badly the attendant had to help me dial. When the officers arrived, I explained everything, the messages, the tapping, the smoke detector camera, the moved belongings. They went inside while I stayed outside under the harsh fluorescent lights, shivering from both cold and panic. They came back 10 minutes later, faces tight. The host claimed I had left the door unlocked, that I was imagining things. Nothing illegal had been found. My laptop, my notebook, even my suitcase still inside. They said without proof or clear evidence, barefoot, there was nothing. With a borrowed blanket from the gas station, carrying only my phone. Every time I glanced back at that house, it looked quiet, normal, nothing to betray the chaos that had unfolded inside. I felt foolish for trusting a listing, for thinking privacy could be guaranteed in a stranger's home. Even weeks later, every time I close my eyes, I hear that tapping. Soft, slow, patient, waiting. And I know somewhere someone could still be watching, keeping a careful count of my fears. I never went back for my things. My laptop, my suitcase, even my clothes, I left them behind. The listing disappeared shortly after, replaced with another under a new name, new photos, a fresh promise of privacy. I reported it, but no one seemed to care. It was easy to disappear, and even easier to convince someone they'd imagined it all. The fear didn't leave me. It followed me home, into my apartment, into my mind. I check locks obsessively, inspect every corner, every reflection, every window. I notice shadows now, the spaces where someone could be hiding, and I jump at any unusual sound. Friends tell me I overreact, but they don't know what it feels like to realize someone could step into your life without permission, study you, and leave before you even notice. Sometimes I wonder how many people stayed there before me. How many noticed odd noises, missing items, little messages that didn't exist. How many blamed themselves for feeling uneasy, for trusting someone's words over their instincts. The scariest part isn't knowing he could watch me. It's knowing I let him. I let myself believe I was safe, and for a little while I wasn't. And sometimes, when my phone lights up for no reason, or a shadow moves in the corner of a room, I wonder if he, or someone like him, is still out there, quietly waiting, watching, counting the moments until they can step inside someone else's life the same way. I remember opening the door and immediately feeling that something was wrong. The air inside the Airbnb was heavy, almost stagnant, smelling faintly of damp wood and something I couldn't identify. It was supposed to be a weekend getaway, a quiet place near the lake, but the moment I stepped in, the floorboards creaked in a way that felt deliberate, like the house itself was watching me. The living room was sparsely furnished, just a couch, a small table, and a cabinet. Everything looked untouched, pristine, but the way the sunlight fell across the floor made long shadows stretch across the room, and I felt like one of them was moving just slightly out of sync. I shook it off, telling myself it was just the angle of the sun. The host was waiting, smiling too broadly, showing me how to lock the doors and windows. He lingered, explaining the Wi-Fi and the appliances, then turned to me with a casual warning. The lake can get quiet at night. Makes you notice things you normally wouldn't. I nodded, pretending not to shiver, and he left me alone in the house. I unpacked slowly, trying to focus on the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Then I noticed it, a faint scratching noise coming from the bedroom corner. Not the floorboards, not the walls exactly. Something smaller, precise, like fingernails on wood. I froze, straining to hear over my own heartbeat. The sound stopped the moment I stepped closer, replaced by a subtle shift in the air, almost as if something, or someone, had moved away just out of sight. My stomach tightened. I knew in that instant that I wasn't completely alone, even though no one should have been there. The first night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard soft scraping from the bedroom corner. I tried to tell myself it was the house settling, or maybe a branch brushing the window. But the sound came from inside, slow, deliberate, almost curious. My phone buzzed. It was a message from the host. Hope you're comfortable. Don't mind the noises, they're harmless. I hadn't complained. I hadn't even mentioned the sound. How did he know? Over the next day, little things started stacking up. My suitcase was moved a few inches from where I left it. The bedspread was creased in a way I hadn't left it. A notebook I hadn't touched was open on a page I didn't recognize. Each small discovery tightened the knot of fear in my stomach. I called the host, trying to sound calm. He said no one had been in the room, that I must be imagining things. But every answer felt rehearsed, like he had expected me to ask. By the second night, I noticed more. The lock on the bedroom door seemed loose, even though I was certain I had secured it. The bathroom mirror had tiny fingerprints on the inside. My laptop was open on a tab I hadn't used. And always, the scratching returned in the bedroom corner at night, slow and deliberate. I barricaded the bedroom door with a chair and tried to sleep under a blanket, but every movement, every creak of the house made me flinch. I realized the host knew when I was awake, when I moved, and when I panicked. He didn't need to yell or chase me. He only needed to exist somewhere I couldn't see. That realization was worse than anything else. The feeling of being watched, studied, controlled, gnawed at me through the night. And when morning came, I wasn't rested. I was tense, exhausted, and terrified that the quietness outside the house was just as deliberate as the quiet inside. Around 1 a.m., the scratching started again, sharper this time, like someone was dragging something across the floor. I sat upright, heart pounding, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. Then it stopped. Silence. Too perfect, too deliberate. My phone buzzed. A message from the host, "You're awake." Good. I like that you notice things. I froze. My blood ran cold. He knew I was awake. He had been watching all along. My eyes darted around the room, landing on the smoke detector above the bed. A tiny, almost imperceptible lens blinked once before going still. I scrambled to the bedroom door, yanking at the lock. It clicked, but the handle didn't budge. Another message appeared, "Don't try to leave. It's easier if you stay calm." Panic surged. I ran to the window, yanking at the latch, but it was painted shut. I grabbed a chair and tried to smash it open, only to hear slow, deliberate footsteps approaching from the bedroom corner. My suitcase rattled. My bag slid across the floor. The host's voice Something came through my phone someone speaker. was circling me. Calm. Soft. Relax. I'm just curious. I didn't hesitate. I shoved the chair through the glass with my shoulder, ignoring the pain, and climbed out into the rain. My bare feet slipped on the slick pavement, cutting and bruising, but I ran anyway, heart hammering, lungs burning, never looking back. Even after the footsteps and the house disappeared behind me, I could still feel the weight of him, the sense that I had been studied, timed, observed. I didn't stop running until the streetlights faded, but the fear didn't leave. It had already followed me out of the house and into my mind. I didn't stop running until the quiet streets swallowed the sound of my own footsteps. My bare feet were cut and bleeding, my clothes soaked from the rain, but none of it mattered. Every shadow felt deliberate, every passing car a threat. I huddled under the awning of a small convenience store, shivering, and tried to call the police. My voice shook so badly the clerk helped me dial. Officers arrived and went to the Airbnb while I stayed outside under the harsh fluorescent lights, wrapped in a blanket. I tried to explain everything, the messages, the smoke detector camera, the sounds in the room, the shifted belongings. They went in cautiously, returning with tight faces. The host claimed nothing had happened, that I had left doors unlocked, and without evidence, the officers couldn't do anything. My suitcase, my laptop, even small personal items remained inside. They handed me a report form and left, and I walked away barefoot, soaked and trembling, carrying only my phone. Even weeks later, the memory of the scraping, the soft footsteps, and the calm, measured messages haunted me. I couldn't sleep in silence, couldn't be alone in a room without checking the corners and the walls. The house had been empty of anyone visible, but it wasn't empty at all. And I knew deep down that even if the host was gone, someone, or something, like him could be waiting quietly in another Airbnb, counting the moments until the next guest made the mistake of trusting their words. I never went back for my things. My suitcase, my laptop, the small personal items I'd packed, they stayed behind. The listing vanished a few days later, replaced by another under a different name. Same guest house. Same promise of quiet, private nights. I reported it, but nothing came of it. It was easy to disappear, and easier still to convince someone they were imagining it all. The fear followed me home, settled into my apartment, and refused to leave. I checked locks obsessively. I noticed shadows in corners, even in daylight. I listened for footsteps, for sounds that aren't there, for the subtle shift of air that might mean someone is watching. Friends tell me I overreacted, but they don't understand how it feels to realize someone could step into your life, uninvited, and leave you wondering if anything is truly yours. Sometimes I replay his words in my head. "You're awake." Good. I like that you notice things. The calm, almost affectionate tone, the quiet manipulation. It's worse than any scream or chase. The scariest part wasn't the house or the sounds or the messages. It was how easily I let myself believe I was safe. How quickly I trusted someone's smile over my own instincts. And now, even years later, when I see a quiet Airbnb listing or a friendly host, I feel that same knot in my stomach, that same creeping dread, and I wonder, who is watching? And how long have they been waiting? I remember pulling into the driveway just as the sun was setting, the sky bleeding orange over the hills. The Airbnb looked perfect in the fading light, fresh paint, a neatly trimmed lawn, a small porch with a single rocking chair. The host had promised complete privacy, a quiet place to work on my writing, and for the first few minutes, it felt like exactly that. The interior was clean and minimal. A small couch, a desk by the window, and a bed tucked into a corner. Nothing looked out of place, but something about the way the shadows fell across the floor made my stomach tighten. They moved in ways I didn't remember when I first walked in. The air smelled faintly of detergent, but underneath it was a stale, lingering odor I couldn't place. The host was there to greet me, a man in his 50s with a calm voice and a reassuring smile. He showed me the locks, the Wi-Fi password, and the appliances. He lingered just a little too long, glancing around the room, asking if I needed anything extra. I smiled and nodded, trying not to notice the way he seemed to memorize every little detail of the space. After he left, I unpacked slowly, listening to the wind brushing against the windows. That's when I noticed it, a faint scraping sound, coming from the corner near the closet. Not the floorboards. Not the walls exactly. Something small, precise, deliberate. My pulse jumped. I stepped closer. The sound stopped immediately. The room felt heavier, smaller, like the space itself was holding its breath. My first instinct was to leave, but the door was locked, and a strange hesitation froze me. I realized somewhere deep down that I wasn't alone, and whoever, or whatever, was here had been waiting for me. The first night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the scraping again, soft, slow, deliberate, from the closet corner. I told myself it was my imagination, the house settling, something in the wind. But it wasn't outside. It was inside, and it moved when I moved, stopping when I looked directly. That night, my phone buzzed. A message from the host. Hope you're comfortable. Don't mind the little noises, they're normal. I hadn't complained. I hadn't even mentioned a sound. How could he know? The thought made my skin crawl. The next morning, I noticed small things shifted. My suitcase had moved slightly. My jacket was draped over the chair differently than I remembered. My notebook, which I hadn't touched since unpacking, was open on a blank page. I didn't understand how anyone could have been in the room without leaving a trace. I confronted the host, trying to keep my voice calm. He smiled, said maybe I was tired or stressed, that old houses can play tricks on your mind. But something in his tone didn't sit right. It wasn't defensive, just amused, almost entertained by my unease. Over the next 2 days, the small signs increased. My charger went missing, only to reappear folded neatly under my bed. A pair of socks vanished, then reappeared in the drawer, aligned perfectly. My laptop opened itself to a tab I hadn't used. Every night, the scratching returned in the closet corner, always slow, always deliberate, always timed with my own movements. By the third night, I slept under a blanket on the couch, phone in hand, flashlight app on. Every creak, every floorboard, every whisper of air made my heart race. I realized that the host knew when I was awake, when I panicked, even when I moved across the room. He didn't need to be in sight. He had already learned how to control the fear itself, how to make me doubt what was real. The most terrifying thought settled over me as I stared at the dark corner. I wasn't imagining any of it. I was being watched, and I didn't know for how long. I woke up just after 3 a.m. to the sound of my name being spoken softly. Not loud, not threatening, just enough to make my eyes snap open. The room was dark, the air thick, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. For a moment, I convinced myself I'd dreamed it. Then my phone buzzed. A message from the host. You shouldn't sleep out here. The bed is more comfortable. My hands went numb. I hadn't told him I moved to the couch. I hadn't made any noise. I slowly raised my phone light and scanned the room. That's when I saw it, the smoke detector above the bed, angled slightly downward. A tiny reflection stared back at me. A lens. I stood up too fast, dizziness washing over me, and backed toward the door. The scraping started again, louder now, coming from inside the closet. Not behind it. Inside. The door shifted inward slightly, just enough to show a thin black line of darkness. Another message appeared. Please don't panic. Doorknob turned once. I just like to know my guests are safe. It stopped, not forcing its way in. Testing, letting me know he could. I grabbed my bag and ran for the window, yanking at the latch. It wouldn't open. Painted shut. My phone buzzed again. You don't need to leave. You agreed to stay. The closet door creaked wider. I heard breathing. Calm. Controlled. Right there in the room with me. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed the chair and slammed it through the window, glass exploding outward. My arm burned, blood running down to my wrist, but I didn't stop. I climbed out, fell hard onto the ground, and ran barefoot into the dark, my lungs screaming, my mind barely keeping up. Behind me, the house stayed quiet. Too quiet, like it was watching me go and letting me. I didn't stop running until the streetlights faded behind me. My feet were cut and bleeding, my clothes torn and soaked, but none of it mattered. Every shadow felt deliberate, every passing car a potential threat. I huddled under the awning of a convenience store, shivering, and tried to call the police. My voice shook so badly the clerk had to help me. The officers arrived and went to the house while I stayed outside, wrapped in a borrowed blanket. I tried to explain everything, the messages, the camera, the sounds, the shifted belongings. They went in, returning with tight, unspeaking faces. The host claimed nothing had happened. Without concrete evidence, the police said there was nothing they could do. My suitcase, my laptop, even the small personal items I had brought remained inside. They handed me a report form, nodded politely, and left. I walked away barefoot, soaked, trembling, carrying only my phone. Weeks later, the scraping, the soft, deliberate noises, and the calm, controlled messages still haunted me. I avoided quiet Airbnbs, distrusted strangers' smiles, and slept with the lights on, the door locked, checking every shadow before closing my eyes. Even though I had escaped physically, I knew that somewhere, someone like him could be waiting, silently, patiently, in another house, ready to study the next guest. And just knowing that was worse than any immediate danger. I never went back for my things. My suitcase, my laptop, the small items I'd brought, they stayed behind. The listing disappeared days later, replaced by another under a new name. Same house. Same promise of privacy. Reporting it didn't matter. No one seemed to care. It was easy to vanish, and even easier to make someone question their own mind. The fear followed me home. I check locks obsessively, notice every corner, every shadow, every subtle movement. Friends tell me I overreact, but they don't know what it feels like to realize someone could step into your life without warning, observe every move, and leave you doubting yourself. Sometimes I replay his words in my head. You shouldn't sleep out here. The bed is more comfortable. Calm. Polite. Deliberate. It wasn't the house that terrified me. It was the understanding that someone had studied my habits, my reactions, my fear like it was a game. The scariest part wasn't being watched. It was that I had let myself trust someone's smile over my instincts. That moment of misplaced confidence, that belief in normalcy, had put me in a room where safety was only an illusion. Even now, I hesitate before staying anywhere alone. I wonder if the next guest will notice the little things, shifted furniture, a faint scrape, a lens hidden in plain sight, or if they'll dismiss it, just like I did, until it's too late. I remember unlocking the front door and stepping into the Airbnb, feeling an almost immediate weight pressing down on me. The house smelled faintly of cleaning supplies and something else I couldn't place, a lingering, sour odor that set my teeth on edge. It was supposed to be a quiet retreat, a weekend escape, but from the first moment, the air felt wrong. The living room was small, neatly arranged, almost painfully tidy. A couch, a small dining table, a bed tucked in the corner. Nothing seemed out of place, yet every shadow stretched differently, like the room was breathing on its own. I tried to shake it off, but my stomach tightened with every creak of the floorboards. The host was there, smiling, friendly, explaining the locks, the Wi-Fi, and the small quirks of the house. He lingered just a second too long, glancing at my bags, noting where I put them. I smiled, nodded, and tried not to feel the way my skin prickled under his gaze. Once he left, I unpacked slowly, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator. That's when I noticed it, a soft scraping sound from the corner near the closet. Slow, deliberate, precise. My heart jumped. I froze, straining to hear over my own breathing. The sound stopped as soon as I stepped closer. For the first time that weekend, I felt it, the unmistakable weight of being watched. My instincts screamed to leave, but something held me there. Maybe it was the exhaustion from the drive, maybe the disbelief that anyone could actually be inside. Whatever it was, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, had been waiting for me before I even arrived. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the scraping again, coming from the corner near the closet. Not the floorboards. Not the walls exactly. Something inside the room. Slow. Precise. Deliberate. My pulse raced, my hands shook, but I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Just the house settling, just my imagination. Then my phone buzzed. A message from the host. Hope you're comfortable. Don't mind the little noises, they're normal. I hadn't complained. I hadn't mentioned a sound. How could he know? The thought twisted my stomach. The next morning, I noticed small things were out of place. My suitcase had been moved slightly. My jacket hung differently on the chair. My notebook, untouched since I unpacked, was open to a blank page I hadn't written on. My laptop had a tab open I didn't recognize. Everything was in its place, but subtly altered, as if someone had been there without leaving a trace. I confronted the host, trying to keep my voice calm. He smiled, said perhaps I was stressed or imagining things. His tone was light, but too controlled, too amused, like he was entertained by my unease. Over the next 2 nights, the subtle disturbances escalated. My charger vanished, then reappeared neatly under the bed. Socks I hadn't touched were folded and stacked in a drawer. Scraping returned each night, always timed with my movements, circling me, stopping when I looked directly. The air felt heavier, and every shadow seemed purposeful. By the 3rd night, I barricaded the bedroom door with a chair, lying on the floor with my phone light on. Every creak, every whisper of air, every faint sound of movement sent my heart racing. I realized the host didn't need to be in sight. He only needed to know I felt watched. And that was worse than anything else, the slow, meticulous control of my fear. The sense that every small sound, every altered item, was designed to make me doubt my own senses, to make me question reality itself. The scraping stopped suddenly around 3 a.m. Not faded, not distant, just gone. The silence was so complete it rang in my ears. I held my breath, waiting for it to return, but instead I heard something worse, the soft click of a door unlocking somewhere inside the house. My phone screen dimmed. I froze. The chair against the door shifted, just slightly, as if someone tested its weight and decided not to push yet. Then I heard a whisper, so close it felt like it brushed my ear, even though I was alone on the floor. "Don't move." I don't know how he got inside the room. I don't remember the door opening. 1 second I was staring at the handle, the next his shadow stretched across the wall, tall and warped by the hallway light. He stood still, letting the silence work on me, letting fear finish the job. He spoke calmly, explaining things like it was normal. The house had hidden passages, old construction. Guests were never supposed to notice, but some people were more observant. He said he liked to watch how long it took before panic set in. Said most people lasted 2 nights. I'd made it 3. I tried to scream. My voice came out thin and useless. He crouched, close enough that I could smell his breath. "You weren't in danger," he said. "Not yet." His hand brushed my wrist, not tight, not violent, just enough to show he could. That was the moment I broke. Not from pain, but from the certainty that I was completely at his mercy. I lunged for the door, knocking the chair aside. He didn't chase me. He didn't need to. The hallway lights flickered as I ran, barefoot, half blind with terror. I heard him laughing softly behind me, not rushing, just letting me go. Outside, I didn't stop until I collapsed in the street. My lungs burned. My hands were bleeding. When I looked back, the house was dark and quiet, like it had never been occupied at all. Later, when the police searched it, they found the passages, the cameras, the logs, pages and pages of notes detailing guests' habits, fears, sleep patterns. Some names were crossed out, some weren't. They never found him. And sometimes late at night, when a room is too quiet and something feels slightly out of place, I wonder if I was ever really streetlights disappeared behind me. My bare feet were cut and bleeding, my clothes soaked with rain, but none of that mattered. Every shadow, every car passing felt like a threat. I huddled under the awning of a 24-hour store, shivering, trying to call the police. My voice was barely audible, shaking so badly the clerk had to help me dial. The officers arrived and went inside while I stayed outside, wrapped in a thin blanket. I tried to explain everything, the hidden passages, the cameras, the messages, the soft whisper of his voice. They went in cautiously, returning with tight, grim faces. The host claimed nothing had happened. Without direct proof, the police said there was nothing they could do. My suitcase, laptop, and other belongings remained inside. They handed me a report form, nodded politely, and left. I walked away barefoot, soaked, trembling, carrying only my phone. Even weeks later, the scraping, the whispers, and the soft, deliberate footsteps haunted me. I couldn't sleep in silence. I checked every corner of every room. I double-locked every door. The quiet, once comforting, now made me tense. The house hadn't just been a building. It had been a trap, designed to teach me how small my sense of safety could be. And I knew deep down that someone like him could be waiting for the next guest, studying, learning, and silently enjoying the quiet terror they could inflict without ever being seen. I never went back for my things. My suitcase, laptop, and personal items stayed behind. The listing disappeared a few days later, replaced under a different name. Same house. Same promise of privacy. Reporting it didn't matter. No one seemed to care. It was easy to vanish, and even easier to make someone question their own mind. The fear followed me home and never really left. I checked locks obsessively, noticed every corner, every shadow, every subtle movement. Friends tell me I overreact, but they don't understand how it feels to know someone could enter your life without warning, study your habits, and leave you doubting yourself. Sometimes I replay his words in my head. You weren't in danger. Not yet. Calm. Controlled. Deliberate. It wasn't the house that terrified me. It was the way he had orchestrated the fear, calculated it, measured it, until I was breaking from the certainty that I was safe. The scariest part wasn't being watched. It was that I had trusted someone's smile over my instincts. That moment of confidence, that belief in normalcy, had put me in a room where safety was only an illusion. Even now, when I see quiet listings or friendly hosts, I feel the same knot in my stomach. And I wonder, who is watching? Who is waiting quietly, patiently, for the next guest to let their guard down? And how long will it take before they do it again?